I never thought a single evening could change everything. I walked into the living room that Tuesday night, expecting the usual comforting glow of my parents' smiles, the aroma of dinner simmering on the stove, maybe the sound of my father's favorite jazz station playing softly in the background. Instead, there was silence, heavy, suffocating silence that immediately made the hairs on my arms stand on end. They were sitting side by side on the couch, unnaturally rigid, faces stern, eyes not meeting mine. My mother's fingers fiddled nervously with the hem of her blouse. My father's jaw was tight, and his hands rested tensely on his knees like he was bracing for impact. The television was off, a rarity in our household. The curtains were drawn. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry, hoping whatever was coming wouldn't break me. "Sit down, Emily," my mother said. Her voice was calm, deceptively so, the kind of calmness that always comes before a storm, the kind nurses use when delivering devastating news. I obeyed, lowering myself slowly onto the armchair across from them. My backpack slid from my shoulder and landed with a soft thud on the carpet. The sound felt deafening in the silence. "Your father and I need to talk to you about something serious," she continued, eyes fixed somewhere on the wall behind me, as if looking at me directly would be too painful. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step on a staircase. I had been a good daughter, I thought desperately. Grades honor roll for 3 years straight. Chores are always completed without complaint. Respect, compassion, and responsibility. I had given all of it. I had thought that would be enough. I had thought I was doing everything right. "You've made some choices lately," my father started, his voice low and controlled in that terrifying way that meant he was trying not to explode. "Choices we cannot condone. Choices that are, well, they're disappointing, deeply disappointing." I blinked rapidly, trying to understand, my mind racing through the past weeks. My choices. What could they possibly mean? I turned down a party invitation last weekend to study. I'd been home by curfew every single night. I'd even volunteered at the community center as they'd suggested. "You've been..." My mother paused, swallowing hard. Her hands now gripping each other so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "Rebellious, careless, and frankly, selfish." The words hit me like physical blows. Rebellious, careless, selfish. None of these words had ever been associated with me. I was the daughter whom teachers praised at parent-teacher conferences. I was the one my younger cousins looked up to. I laughed nervously. A sharp, brittle sound that didn't belong to me, hoping that somehow laughter could cut through the tension. "Mom, Dad, what are you talking about? I've been working so hard. I thought I was doing everything right." My father shook his head slowly, deliberately, as if I were a stranger he was deeply disappointed in. "You've been making mistakes, Emily. Big ones. Mistakes we can't ignore. And we won't support them anymore." A lump formed in my throat, hard and painful. My vision blurred at the edges. "Wait. Support? What are you saying? What mistakes? You're on your own from now on," my mother said, her voice flat, almost clinical, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. "We can't be involved in your life anymore. Not like we have been. We can't provide guidance to someone who won't listen. We can't trust you." The words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I felt the room spin, the walls closing in. My hands began to tremble in my lap. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe properly. "You're kicking me out? You're abandoning me?" "No," my father said, but there was no warmth in his denial, no reassurance in his tone. "We're giving you reality. Life has consequences, Emily. Real consequences. You need to learn that without us holding your hand through everything." I stared at them, disbelieving, searching their faces for some sign that this was a cruel joke, some bizarre test. The people who had raised me, who had taught me to ride a bike, and helped me with algebra homework and cheered at my piano recitals. These people were telling me, with calm finality, that I was no longer worthy of their care in one conversation. One brutal, heartless conversation had shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. But what did I do? I finally managed to choke out, my voice breaking. "Please, just tell me what I did wrong." They exchanged a glance, some silent communication I wasn't privy to. My father's expression hardened. "You know what you did, and the fact that you're sitting here pretending you don't just prove our point." But I didn't know. That was the horror of it. I genuinely had no idea what crime I'd committed that was so terrible it warranted this emotional execution. I couldn't stay in that room another second. I ran, tears already streaming down my face, taking the stairs 2 at a time to my room. I slammed the door behind me, locking it with shaking hands, and collapsed on my bed, feeling hollow. The air felt too heavy to breathe. Every memory of hugs, encouragement, laughter. Every story they had told me about how proud they were, all of it seemed like a lie now, a carefully constructed illusion that had just been torn away. That night, I cried until my pillow was soaked through. I cried for the daughter I had been just hours ago. I cried for the daughter I no longer believed they loved. I cried because the people who were supposed to protect me, guide me, and love me unconditionally had broken me with a single conversation. My phone buzzed with texts from friends making plans for the weekend. I ignored them all. How could I explain this to anyone? How could I put into words the destruction of everything I'd built my identity on? But somewhere in the darkness of that night, between the sobs and the pain, something else began to grow. It was small at first, barely an ember in the ashes of my grief. But it was there. I would survive. I would rise. I would show them, in ways they would never anticipate, that I was not broken. I refused to be broken. Little did I know, the path ahead would be darker and more challenging than anything I had ever imagined. The betrayal I felt that night would shape me, sharpen me, and push me toward a reckoning I could never have predicted. The next morning, I woke up stiff and hollow, like my body had gone on autopilot through the night of grief. My eyes were swollen, nearly shut from crying. My parents' words echoed in my mind over and over. A cruel loop I couldn't escape. You're on your own. We can't trust you. I didn't know how to face the world. School, friends, life outside my room seemed like a different planet, one I wasn't prepared for. One where I'd have to pretend everything was normal when my entire foundation had just crumbled beneath me. I got dressed mechanically, staring at myself in the mirror. My eyes looked tired, haunted. The reflection staring back wasn't just me. It was a girl who had been betrayed, abandoned by the two people who should have been her safe place. I tried to cover the evidence of my breakdown with concealer, but nothing could hide the deadness in my eyes. Downstairs, my parents were already gone. They'd left for work early, avoiding me. A note on the kitchen counter reminded me about chores. No good morning. No have a good day. Just expectations and obligations. The normalcy of it made everything worse somehow. At school, I kept my head down. Friends tried to chat during homeroom, but I was too raw to talk. Every smile felt fake. Every laugh felt hollow. And when people asked how I was, I lied through my teeth. I'm fine, I said, because the truth was too heavy, too shameful to share. What would I even say? My parents don't want me anymore, and I don't know why. By lunchtime, whispers had begun. Gossip, always cruel in high school, had found a new target. Me. I heard fragments of conversations as I walked past groups in the hallway. Did you hear about Emily? Her parents don't trust her anymore. Yeah. I heard she's basically on her own now. Must have done something really bad. I always knew she was too perfect. People who seem that good are always hiding something. Every word felt like salt on an open wound. I wanted to scream, to curl into a corner and vanish, but I couldn't. I couldn't let anyone see me break. That would only confirm whatever narrative my parents had started spreading. I spent the next few days in a daze. I kept my grades up out of sheer stubbornness, pretended I was normal, but inside, I was crumbling piece by piece. That first week alone, I realized something essential. If I wanted to survive, I couldn't rely on anyone else. Not friends who would believe rumors, not teachers who saw me as just another student, and certainly not my parents. I had to rely on myself, only myself. It was in that week that I discovered how much control they had always had over me, and how much I could take back. My mother had always managed everything in my life, my schedule, my responsibilities, even my friendships. She had vetted every friend I made, questioned every activity I joined, and monitored every grade. She had kept me wrapped in a cocoon of her making, and now that cocoon was gone. The world was raw and unfiltered, and I had to learn to navigate it on my own. At first, I stumbled badly. I missed deadlines because I'd relied on my mother's reminders. I forgot small things like bringing lunch money or signing a permission slip. I lost my lunch card in the cafeteria and had to go without food that day, my stomach growling through afternoon classes. I felt the sting of humiliation every time I made a mistake. Every time I proved to myself, to them, that maybe they were right about me. And every time I failed, I remembered my parents' words. You're selfish, careless, not worth our trust. But slowly, painfully, something shifted inside me. I began to discover my own strength. The kind of strength I didn't know existed because I'd never had to use it. I took control of my mornings, setting 3 alarms to make sure I woke up on time. I made my own schedule, color-coded and organized, tracking every assignment and obligation. I started managing my homework, chores, and part-time job at the local bookstore independently. For the first time in my life, I realized that I could handle life without their constant surveillance and guidance. And maybe even better than they imagined. Then came the second wave of betrayal. This time from an unexpected source. My closest friends were distancing themselves. Sarah, whom I'd known since elementary school, stopped sitting with me at lunch. Marcus, whom I'd tutored in chemistry all semester, walked past me in the hallway without acknowledgement. Even Emma, my supposed best friend, sent increasingly short, cold responses to my texts. I finally confronted Emma after school one day, catching her arm as she tried to hurry past me in the parking lot. "Emma, what's going on? Why are you avoiding me?" She looked uncomfortable, guilty even, her eyes darting away from mine. "Emily, my parents talked to your parents. They said you've been making some really bad choices. They said you can't be trusted and that I shouldn't be around you." The betrayal felt like being punched in the stomach. "What choices? What are they saying I did?" Emma shrugged helplessly. "They didn't give specifics. Just that it was serious. And honestly, Emily, if your own parents are cutting you off, there must be something to it, right?" I stood there, frozen, as Emma walked away. My parents hadn't just abandoned me. They'd poisoned the well, turned my friends against me without even giving them a reason. They'd destroyed my reputation based on nothing. On some imagined transgression I still couldn't identify. The sting of that betrayal was sharp, cutting deeper than I expected. But it also lit a fire inside me, one that burned away the last remnants of the girl who had cried herself to sleep that first night. I realized that if I was going to survive this, I would have to build myself a fortress emotionally, socially, and academically. And if people doubted me, if they judged me without truth or evidence, I would show them the reality through my actions. I would take my pain and turn it into power. It started small. I confronted tiny injustices, proving my worth quietly but decisively. A teacher who doubted my capabilities on a group project, I delivered a flawless individual presentation that earned the highest grade in the class. A classmate who mocked my situation. I excelled in the very subject they'd used to belittle me, scoring higher on the next exam than they had all semester. Each victory was small but crucial, each one a reminder that I was not the broken, worthless person my parents had claimed I was. Weeks passed. I started noticing cracks in the perfect image my parents had tried to maintain. I saw them calling my old friends' parents, asking about me behind my back, trying to check in ways that felt more like surveillance than concern. Mrs. Henderson from next door mentioned in passing that my mother had asked her to keep an eye on me. Every inquiry, every attempt at control, only reminded me how wrong they were, how unjustly they had treated me. That's when the idea of revenge started to take real shape in my mind, not the kind that hurts them physically, not even the kind that confronts them directly, but the kind that leaves no doubt. I would rebuild my life, stronger and better than they could ever imagine, and I would make certain they saw it. The first real opportunity came when I received news of a regional academic competition. A showcase, with local media coverage and representatives from universities. My parents, deliberately, were not informed. My first thought was immediate and satisfying. Let them not know. Let them watch me excel without them. Let them see what I can do when they're not controlling every aspect of my life. I worked tirelessly, 4 weeks, putting every ounce of effort and emotion into perfecting my project. I chose a topic I was passionate about, the psychological impact of parental emotional abandonment on adolescent development. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sought help from mentors outside my family. Mr. Richardson, my AP psychology teacher, spent hours helping me refine my research methodology. Mrs. Chen at the bookstore connected me with a local therapist who specialized in family dynamics and agreed to be interviewed for my project. I learned to trust guidance that didn't come with judgment or condemnation. And slowly, the shadow of betrayal began to feel less heavy. Finally, the day of the competition arrived. I walked into the auditorium with a quiet confidence I had never known before. My project, complete with data, interviews, and case studies, was presented flawlessly. I spoke about family systems, about trust and betrayal, about resilience in the face of abandonment. Every word was professional, academic. But anyone paying attention could hear my story woven through the research. Judges were impressed, leaning forward in their seats, taking notes. Media cameras flashed. Teachers who had watched my struggle over the past months nodded in admiration, and somewhere, I imagined my parents, curious, perhaps, hearing about it through the grapevine. secretly hoping I would fail so they could feel justified in their treatment of me. When my name was announced as the first place winner, applause erupted through the auditorium. I stood on stage, receiving the award and a scholarship check. And for the first time in months, I felt an intoxicating mix of vindication and empowerment. I hadn't just survived their betrayal. I had thrived despite it. Backstage, reporters asked for interviews. Local news wanted quotes. I spoke with calm authority about my project, my goals, and my journey. I mentioned, without bitterness or accusation, how challenges had shaped me and how I had learned to overcome adversity when support systems failed. It was subtle, yet intentional. My parents didn't hear my words directly, but the word would get back to them through the community grapevine. They would see the newspaper coverage. They would hear neighbors congratulating them on my success. And they would realize that the daughter they had tried to break with their harsh lesson had become unbreakable. That night, lying in bed with my award on the desk across from me, I reflected on the journey so far. I had cried until I had no tears left. I had suffered through loneliness and betrayal. I had felt abandoned and worthless. But those feelings, as painful as they had been, had forged a resilience I didn't know I possessed. And as exhaustion finally pulled me toward sleep, I knew this was only the beginning. The real reckoning wasn't just about proving my worth to others. It was about teaching my parents, silently but powerfully, that actions and words carry consequences. That breaking someone's spirit is a risk, and sometimes, the broken come back stronger than anyone imagined possible. The message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after the competition. I was at the bookstore, shelving returns in the psychology section. Another layer of irony in my life, when my phone buzzed. "We need to talk. It's time to set things right." It was from my mother. The first direct communication in months. I stared at the words, my fingers hovering over the keyboard as my heart rate accelerated. For weeks, I had avoided thinking about them intentionally. I had built a life around school, work, the few friends who had stood by me, and small victories, the silent revenge of proving myself in every arena. But now, the past was calling. And I realized the conversation I had both dreaded and anticipated was finally, inevitably here. I didn't respond immediately. I made them wait, just as they'd made me wait for answers I never received. 2 hours later, after my shift ended, I typed back carefully, "We can talk, but I need honesty. No more vague accusations. No more blaming me for things you won't name. I will not be manipulated again." The response came too quickly, like they'd been watching their phones, waiting. A flurry of messages, a cascade of apologies, and excuses, and awkwardly phrased "we were worried about you" statements that felt rehearsed. I didn't respond again. I had spent months learning patience and emotional control. I wasn't going to throw it all away now. We agreed to meet that Friday evening. I chose the location carefully. Riverside Cafe, a quiet place with dim lighting, small tables, and the faint scent of coffee and pastries. Neutral ground. The kind of place where raised voices would draw attention. Where they couldn't dominate me the way they could in our home. When Friday arrived, I dressed deliberately not to impress them, but to armor myself. Dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, and my competition award pin on my collar, a reminder to myself, and to them, of who I had become. They arrived together, 5 minutes late. My father looked stiff and uncomfortable in khakis and a button-down shirt, like he was attending a business meeting. My mother wore that familiar, worried expression that had always felt more suffocating than comforting, her hands clutching her purse like a lifeline. They looked at me like I was a stranger. In a way, I was. The Emily they had known, compliant, eager to please, desperate for their approval, was gone. "Emily," my mother began, her voice tentative as she slid into the booth across from me. "We're sorry for everything." I sipped my water slowly, deliberately, waiting for the storm of emotion to settle in my chest before I spoke. "Sorry isn't enough," I said quietly but firmly. My father's jaw tightened. That familiar sign of frustration when things didn't go his way. "We didn't mean to. We thought we were protecting you from yourself." "That's the problem," I said, holding their gaze steadily, refusing to look away first. "You thought. You didn't ask. You didn't listen. You didn't even tell me what I supposedly did wrong. And instead of helping me, you broke me. Every word you said that night, every accusation, it wasn't a concern. It was control. It was a judgment without evidence. And it hurt. Deeply." My mother's eyes filled with tears, the kind I hadn't seen in years, genuine fear mixed with regret. My father shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to argue or retreat into silence. I've spent months rebuilding myself, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. Without you, without your guidance, without your approval. And I realized something important. You don't get to decide my worth. I do. I've learned to trust myself, to stand on my own, to fight for myself, to protect myself from people who claim to love me but use their words as weapons. They both flinched visibly, as if the weight of those words had physically struck them. My mother reached out across the table, her hand trembling. We didn't realize how much we hurt you. We thought we were teaching you responsibility, independence, by abandoning me. I interrupted, my voice rising slightly before I reined it in. Other patrons were starting to glance our way. By turning my friends against me, by spreading rumors in the community without even telling me what I supposedly did. That's not teaching. That's cruelty. Silence fell over the table, a silence heavier than any argument, thicker than any lecture they had ever given me. The background noise of the cafe, clinking cups, murmured conversations, and the hiss of the espresso machine seemed impossibly loud. You've changed, my father said finally, quietly, almost in awe. You're stronger than we expected, more independent. Yes, I said, meeting his eyes without flinching. I had to be, because you weren't there. You didn't believe in me when it mattered most. You cut me off without explanation, without support, without even telling me what I did to deserve it. And that changed me fundamentally. I paused, taking a breath to steady myself. I still don't know what I supposedly did. To this day, months later, I have no idea what crime was so terrible it warranted emotional abandonment. My parents exchanged a long glance, another one of those silent communications I'd never been privy to. My mother spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. You were spending time with Jake Morrison. I blinked, confused. Jake, from my English class. We were partners on a project. He has a reputation, my father cut in, his voice hardening. Drugs? Skipping school. We heard you were seen with him multiple times. We thought the pieces finally clicked into place. And I felt a wave of something between rage and hysterical laughter. You destroyed our relationship because I did a school project with someone you disapproved of. You didn't even ask me about it. We tried to protect you. My mother started. No, I said firmly. You assumed, you judged, you condemned me without trial. Jake was struggling, yes, but he was trying to turn his life around. We were working on a project about redemption in literature. That's it. Nothing more. And even if there had been something more, even if I had made a mistake, you're my parents. You're supposed to talk to me, guide me, not abandon me. I looked at them both, really looked, for the first time without fear, without longing for approval. I saw two flawed human people capable of love but also capable of immense cruelty when blinded by their own fears and assumptions. This isn't just about punishment or revenge, I said, softening slightly but maintaining my boundaries. It's about accountability. You need to understand that words can wound as much as actions. You need to understand that trust, once broken, isn't given back with a single apology. It's earned. Slowly, over time, through consistent actions, not excuses. My mother nodded, tears slipping down her face, leaving tracks in her makeup. We'll try. We will. Anything to make it right. We just want our daughter back. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Trying is not enough. You will have to wait. You will have to prove yourselves through actions, not words. You'll have to rebuild trust, brick by brick. And until then, don't expect me to be the same girl you controlled before. I'm not that girl anymore. I never will be again. For the first time in months, I felt the scales shift. The power dynamic had changed. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't their victim. I was a daughter, yes, but one who had grown into her own person. Independent, unshakable, and unafraid to demand respect. The rest of the evening passed with cautious conversation. They tried to make amends, sharing small details about their own childhoods, their own parents' strict rules, trying to explain, not excuse, their behavior. I listened. I engaged. But I kept my power centered, my boundaries firm. I didn't give them hugs when we said goodbye. I didn't laugh at their attempts at jokes. I was civil, even warm at moments. But I didn't surrender the ground I'd fought so hard to claim. When we finally parted ways in the parking lot, they lingered, clearly hoping for more reconciliation than I was ready to give. I offered a small nod. We can talk again. In time. If you're willing to do the work. Walking to my car, stepping into the cool evening air. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control, freedom, and a quiet, simmering sense of victory. Not revenge in the cruel sense, but vindication. The satisfaction of knowing I had reclaimed myself from the very people who had tried to break me. The journey wasn't over. The healing wasn't complete. But for the first time, I saw a clear path forward. And I knew, deep down, that I would never let anyone know one diminish me again. Weeks passed after the cafe confrontation. Life continued to move forward, and I felt stronger with each passing day. My parents had started reaching out more consistently with brief texts asking how I was, requests to meet for coffee, and even an invitation to Sunday dinner that I politely declined. They were trying, in their awkward way, but I wasn't ready to fully let them back in. I had started seeing Dr. Martinez, a therapist who specialized in family trauma. Our weekly sessions helped me untangle the complicated knots of guilt, anger, shame, and loss my parents had left behind. She helped me understand that my anger was justified, that boundaries were healthy, and that forgiveness, if it came, had to be on my terms, in my time. Classes were going well. My GPA had actually improved. The bookstore had promoted me to shift supervisor. I'd even started dating someone cautiously, carefully, but with an openness I hadn't thought possible months ago. Then one evening, in early spring, as I returned from a long walk by the river, a letter sat propped against my apartment door. Plain manila envelope, unmarked except for my name written in jagged. All too familiar handwriting that made my stomach drop. I hadn't thought about Cameron Hayes in years. Childhood friend turned bully, the one who had always tested boundaries, who thrived on finding people's weaknesses and exploiting them. We'd lost touch after middle school when his family moved across town, and I'd been grateful for the distance. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked my door, and sat down on the couch before opening the envelope. Inside, the letter was brief and unsettling. Emily, I heard what happened with your parents. Interesting how life works out, isn't it? Thought you'd want to know. I still have what you thought was lost forever. You can't truly move forward without facing the truth. Meet me tomorrow, 7 p.m., at my apartment. Address below. Come alone. I froze, my mind racing. What could he possibly have? And then it hit me like a punch to the gut. The diary. The small leather-bound journal I had kept religiously in middle school. Cameron had found it once during a sleepover at his house, when we were still friends. He'd used it to humiliate me in front of classmates the next week, twisting my private thoughts, exposing my childhood crushes and insecurities, making me the laughingstock of 7th grade. I thought I'd gotten it back. I thought I'd destroyed it years ago. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced through every interaction with Cameron, every cruel comment, every taunt. The diary had contained everything: my fears about not being good enough, my desperate attempts to understand why I felt different from other kids, my confusion about my identity, my body, my place in the world. I thought about ignoring the letter, blocking it out like I'd learned to block out so many other painful things. But something Dr. Martinez had said in our last session echoed in my mind. You can't heal what you won't face. The next evening, I dressed in jeans and a jacket, telling my roommate where I was going and to call me in an hour to check in. I drove to the address Cameron had provided, a small apartment complex on the east side of town, the kind with peeling paint and flickering hallway lights. He opened the door on the first knock, that familiar smirk playing at his lips. He'd grown, taller, broader, but his eyes held the same calculating gleam I remembered. Emily, he said, pretending warmth that didn't reach his eyes. Long time no see. You've changed. Grown up. I know exactly why you called me here, I said firmly, not moving from the doorway. You want to intimidate me. Try to make me feel small again, vulnerable. It won't work. He raised an eyebrow, surprised by my directness. Straight to the point. I like it. Yeah, I have your diary. Still have it, after all these years. Kept it as insurance. You could say insurance against what? I asked, genuinely curious now rather than afraid. Against you forgetting where you came from. Who you really are, underneath all that confidence. He gestured for me inside. Reluctantly, I stepped in but stayed near the door. The apartment was sparse, minimal furniture. Clothes draped over a chair, and empty takeout containers on the counter. Cameron himself looked tired, older than his years, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of a harder life than I'd imagined. You want to hold my childhood diary over me? I said, my voice steady. Go ahead. Post it online. Read it at the next town meeting. Share it with everyone I know. Do whatever you think will hurt me. His smirk faltered. You don't mean that. I absolutely do, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. That diary was written by a scared 12-year-old girl who didn't understand herself yet. Yes, it contains private thoughts. Embarrassing ones, painful ones. But it doesn't define me. Not anymore. I'm not that girl anymore. I took a step closer, feeling the weight of every battle I'd fought over the past months. You tried to break me once, Cameron. My parents tried to break me, but I survived. I survived, and I grew. And I learned that the only power anyone has over me is the power I give them. And I'm not giving you any. Cameron laughed, but it sounded nervous, uncertain. So what? You're just going to forgive me. Pretend none of this ever happened. Pretend you're not scared I'll ruin your life all over again. I don't forgive you, I said calmly, meeting his eyes with a steadiness I'd earned through fire. I don't owe you forgiveness. But I'm also not going to let you control me. You can keep the diary. You can burn it. You can publish it as a best-selling memoir. It doesn't matter anymore. I know who I am now, and that 12-year-old's fears and insecurities aren't my shame to carry. I paused, seeing something shift in his expression. Surprise, maybe even respect. And honestly, looking at you now, I think you need that diary more than I do. You need to believe you have power over someone because you don't have power over your own life. The words hung in the air between us. Cameron's smirk disappeared entirely, replaced by something more vulnerable, almost angry. You don't know anything about my life, he said defensively. You're right, I don't, I admitted. But I know that people who are truly confident, truly secure, don't need to threaten others with their past. They don't need to hold on to artifacts from middle school to feel important. So whatever you're going through, whatever made you reach out after all these years, I hope you figure it out. I genuinely do. I turned toward the door, feeling lighter with each step. If you want to talk, really talk, without threats or games, my number hasn't changed. But if you want to keep playing these power games, count me out. I have better things to do with my life. Wait, Cameron said, his voice different now, smaller. You really don't care about any of it? I paused at the door, looking back at him. I care about who I am now, about the person I fought to become. That diary, those fears and insecurities. They're part of my story. Part of my journey, but they're not my present, and they're not my future. For the first time since I'd known him, Cameron looked genuinely uncertain. I thought you'd beg. Offer me something to keep it quiet. Then you don't know me at all, I said simply. Goodbye, Cameron. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I walked out of his apartment with my head high, the evening air cool against my face. Behind me, I heard the door close softly, not slammed in anger, but closed with a finality that felt like the ending of a chapter I'd been trying to finish for years. The city lights reflected off puddles from an earlier rain as I walked to my car. For the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of closure. Not the kind that comes from revenge or confrontation for the sake of anger, but the quiet, unshakable power of someone who had been broken and refused to remain broken. I drove home slowly, windows down, letting the spring air wash over me. The diary no longer mattered. Cameron no longer mattered. The past no longer held me hostage in the way it once had. I had finally, truly reclaimed my life, my narrative, and my worth. When I got home, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Can we meet this weekend? Your father and I would really like to talk. No pressure. Whenever you're ready. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that came with anything related to my parents. But this time, there was something different. A small opening. A possibility I hadn't felt before. I typed back. Sunday afternoon. The park is near my place. 2 p.m. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. In the way they hoped. But it was a beginning. A chance for them to prove through actions, not words, that they understood what they'd done. 3 months later, I found myself sitting in that same park on a warm Sunday afternoon. The trees were in full bloom. Children were playing on the swings. And couples walked hand in hand along the path by the lake. My parents and I had been meeting regularly, slowly, carefully, rebuilding something that looked different from what we'd had before. They were learning to listen without controlling. I was learning to share without seeking their approval. It was awkward and uncomfortable, and sometimes painful. But it was honest in a way our relationship had never been before. My father had broken down during our third meeting, actually crying as he admitted how terrified he'd been of losing me to what he saw as bad influences. My mother had written me a letter pages long detailing her own childhood, her own parents' controlling nature, And how she'd unconsciously repeated patterns she'd sworn she never would. It didn't erase what they'd done. It didn't make the pain disappear. But it helped me understand that they were human, flawed, capable of tremendous mistakes even when they believed they were protecting me. Dr. Martinez had warned me about this phase. Healing isn't linear, she'd said. Some days you'll feel like you've made progress. Other days, you'll feel all the anger come rushing back. Both are valid. Both are part of the process. She was right. There were days when I saw a text from my mother and felt nothing but warmth. Other days, I saw their names on my phone and felt the ghost of that first night's betrayal all over again. But I was learning. Learning to hold space for complicated feelings. Learning that you can love people and still maintain boundaries. Learning that forgiveness, if it comes, doesn't mean forgetting or excusing it, means releasing the weight of anger that you've been carrying, so it stops poisoning your present. One afternoon, I met my friend Jessica, one of the few who had stood by me through everything, for coffee. As we sat in our usual booth, she studied me with a smile. "You know what's different about you," she said. "What, you're lighter?" "Not physically," she laughed, "but you don't carry everything on your shoulders anymore. You used to seem like you were always bracing for impact. Now you just exist. Comfortably." Her words struck something deep. She was right. Somewhere along the journey through the pain, the betrayal, the confrontations, the small victories, I had stopped living in constant fear of disappointing people. I had stopped seeking external validation for my worth. That evening, alone in my apartment, I pulled out the journal I'd been keeping since high school, a new one, leather-bound and worn from constant use. I flipped through pages chronicling the past year, the devastation, the anger, the small triumphs, the gradual healing. On a fresh page, I wrote what would become my final entry about this chapter of my life. I am not defined by their cruelty, their words, or their control. I am not defined by the mistakes they made or the pain they caused. I am defined by my courage, my resilience, and my refusal to be broken. I have learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. It's about setting boundaries even when people you love protest. It's about knowing your worth even when the people who should have reminded you of it tried to take it away. My parents broke something in me that night. That's true. But in the breaking, they also revealed what I was capable of. They showed me that I could survive without them, that I could thrive without their approval, that I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive them. Some wounds leave scars that never completely fade, but I can live with the scars now. I can carry my story without letting it crush me. I am Emily. I am a survivor. I am enough, and I always have been. I closed the journal, running my hand over the worn leather cover. The ink was still wet on the page, but the words felt dry, settled, complete. Outside my window, the sun was setting over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. I thought about the girl I'd been a year ago, terrified, broken, certain her life was over. I thought about everything she'd endured, every battle she'd fought, every small victory she'd won. If I could go back and tell her anything, it would be this. You will survive this. You will be stronger because of it. And one day, you'll wake up and realize that the worst thing that ever happened to you was also the catalyst that made you become who you were always meant to be. I stood up, stretched, and looked at my reflection in the window. The girl staring back was different now, older, wiser, tempered by fire. Her eyes held shadows that would never completely disappear. But they also held light, strength, and a hard-won peace. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Thank you for giving us another chance. We don't deserve it, but we're grateful. See you next Sunday." I typed back, "See you Sunday." I wasn't the same girl who had walked into that living room a year ago, expecting warmth and finding devastation. I would never be that girl again. But that was okay. That girl had served her purpose. She'd been the foundation for who I was now. And who was I now? She was unbreakable. Because nothing could hurt her, but because she'd learned that being broken wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of building something stronger. I grabbed my jacket and headed out to meet friends. The evening was young. The city was alive. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly free. The past would always be part of my story, but it no longer had the power to write my future. That power belonged to me, and I would never give it away again.